Editing. The very thought of it gives many of us palpitations. We put so much effort into adding the things that we think belong to our work. The thought of removing anything or tearing it apart with criticisms is nothing short of terrifying. But as we mentioned in previous lessons, the thing to remember is that when we create content, it is not about us or the internal stakeholders at our business. The things we create are for the customer. And so when things come to a choice between what is easy for us and what is easy for the customer, we must always choose what is easy for our customers. Hello, I'm Mike Phillips, growth marketer and strategist with over 12 years of marketing experience. In this lesson, we're going to focus on how to enhance the user experience and increase retention of your customers through the use of editing. In this lesson, we're going to go over the definitions of what we even mean when we talk about editing your work. We're going to talk about the benefits of good editing, the pitfalls of poor or skipping editing, as well as give you a few homework assignments for you to practice on your own. Let's get started. So let's begin with what we mean when we talk about editing our writing. We put a lot of effort when it comes to SEO in putting into the content all the right short and long keywords and the right language so that our customers have their questions addressed and we are ranked accordingly. When it comes to editing, there is a great deal of risk in removing the things that matter most. That's why we must put priorities in order. The technical elements of our SEO need to remain intact, and so we should always have a frame of reference, our brief, to be able to go back to be able to make sure that the key phrases that need to be in our content remain in the right structure and wording. It's very easy when we are editing for clarity, for content length, or for user experience to accidentally dice up or introduce synonyms to our keyword phrases that reduce the impact of our SEO. All the same, when we are editing, it's just as important to make sure we keep an eye and mind to how our customers' user experience will be when consuming the content. We must consider the length, the clarity, the focus, the voice, the tone. All of these factors must also be measured in the areas that wrap around the long keywords, phrases, so that we are not disrupting our technical SEO, but are able to enhance the retention and quality of our user experience. The framework that I recommend when you edit your work is to do a few things. 1. Keep your SEO brief handy. As you go through for editing, make sure you're able to reference the important keyword phrases that you need intact to keep your technical SEO performing well. I would recommend bolding or highlighting these phrases. Work your editing in a separate document so that you can have these bolding and highlighting or color coding so that you can see the phrases that you need intact stand out very easily. This allows you to see the space between and around the phrases that you are optimizing for so that you can edit freely with less risk of accidentally interrupting the things that you need to keep intact. The second aspect I recommend you do is to step through your editing with the right order. Of course, spell checking is important, but a foundational thing you should look at first is voice and tone. We explored what these are in prior lessons, but when we edit, it's very easy to disrupt or skew from the intended tone, or worse, the character of our brand voice. Make sure that the edits you make keep in line with the voice of your brand and the tone for the appropriate context of your work. The next thing I recommend you look at is clarity of your content. We've talked about this in other lessons as well, but when it comes to editing, it's very easy to either oversimplify or not give it enough attention. The closer that we get to a completed product, the more protective we tend to get of it as the creators. This is why it's important to have a system. Look through your sentence length, the structure of how you communicate, how long your paragraphs are. Explore these in between the voice and tone, but before you get to the final spell and grammar check. Good editing goes a long way towards making an impact for your customer's experience. The first thing is trust. Nothing makes you skeptical of a piece of content quicker than poor editing of spelling, grammar, sentence structure, and substance. The second benefit of editing is that it enhances how easy it is for your consumer to fully consume, digest, and remember the content that you've created. Good editing allows you to make sure there are no extraneous words, that there are no fluffing sentences, so to speak, no filler that does not add value, either to your technical SEO or the journey and the narrative that you are wrapping those terms in. The final benefit of good editing is the emotional outcome that your content can leave your customer with. Good editing allows you to address the full impact, not just the technical aspects of the content, but also the way it makes your buyers feel. When you edit for this, you are able to make sure that their emotional journey moves them closer to purchase through trust. When you focus on developing trust, you are able to ease objections to purchase, you reduce price sensitivity, and you increase loyalty. Not bad for just some editing. Now let's discuss some of the pitfalls of insufficient editing or skipping it altogether. Insufficient editing results in either not giving enough attention to all categories or only giving one category attention. In essence, it's the problem of not giving enough time to this phase of your writing. Insufficient editing manifests very easily when it comes to the concept of spell check. If we do not give enough attention to spelling, we may include misspelled words, which reduces trust, but could even go so far as to miss our technical SEO if the keyword itself was not spelled right. How do we make sure that some of the technical aspects of editing are done well? I recommend you invest in some tools that can help you get more efficient. Grammarly is an excellent plugin for web browsers and a standalone application that allows you to put your content into an editor and have it checked for clarity, for tone, for spelling, and for grammar. I find it especially helpful when we're focusing on longer pieces of content because it also looks for repetitiveness and grades the overall readability score of your work. Similar tools like the Hemingway app also perform in this way. The choice of which tool to use is not as important as the openness to building a system to help you get your editing done efficiently and completely. The risk of skipping editing altogether is that you can undermine page authority with content that seems weak. Furthermore, poor quality content will actually impact your ranking as well. The ranking of search engines is designed to learn from human behavior. This is why we call it machine learning. If humans are mistrustful and their behavior reflects through bounce rates, low dwell time, the rankings will eventually suffer too. This is so much more important than simply having a grade-ready report as much as it is making sure you deliver something that is worthy of the attention that your customers are giving to your content. As we talk about the technical aspects of editing, it's just as important to consider it holistically. Go back to earlier lessons in this course. Reflect on simplicity, on voice, on tone, and look for ways that you can double-check your work in these areas too. It is more than making sure your keyword phrases are intact and the story in between the phrases is spelled and structured correctly. It's about reviewing overall. And to do that, you need to have similar frameworks. Go back to your voice and tone guide document. You should have created one in a prior lesson. Measure what you've created against that document to make sure your voice and tone are intact. Do this first, then move into structures for simplicity, for skimmability, for minimalism of content, and lastly, go through for spelling and grammar. The order and reference of these materials is so important. At the last stage, when you are done going through in that order, go back to your brief. Go to the SEO brief and check that your keywords are there in the right density and your overall phrasing has not skewed from the right queries you're trying to hit. One additional point when it comes to editing is to keep an eye for duplicate content. It's very easy to inadvertently, through the editing process, introduce repeat phrases from other pages on your site. We all know that duplicate content is frowned upon by search engines. And so part of the editing is not just focusing on the piece in front of you, but bearing it in mind in the context of all the other content you've created for your site. Keep a few key phrases in mind that you know are important for your brand. Develop a few alternatives, synonymized versions of what that phrase should be, so that you can rotate between them. A thesaurus here is going to be your friend, as are different colloquial references online. I like to use the website WordHippo because it gives excellent alternative phrasings more than just word-for-word substitutions. The site you use is not as important as making sure you're aware of the resources out there and that you should try using them so that you can avoid the pitfalls of accidentally creating too similar of content between different pages. Lastly, when it comes to editing, this is not a one and done process. Like so much of optimizing retention in UX, this is something we come back to time and time again. The spell check process seems as something you can fully finish and check off your list. But as we continue optimizing the language, as we look for new opportunities to minimize or simplify content, or as we find new ways that our customers speak and we enhance our trust-building rapport, every time the content is altered, a good editing is required. Use the tools we've discussed and remember the processes and frameworks that you've developed for voice, tone, simplicity, and use those in your review. Get comfortable going back through your content regularly. This is a great way to make sure you avoid the human error of missing certain pieces of content for errors. As an editor, it's your job to assure accuracy in what you create. Part of this is knowing the limits of what the human mind and eye are capable of doing. Do not edit when you are fatigued, as you are more likely to miss key errors. Furthermore, don't rely on only one set of eyes. Editing should be a collaborative effort. We have tools that we've mentioned in this course, Grammarly, Hemingway, but there is no substitute for having a human do the final review. When you work as a team, you are less likely to all of you miss the same error, and this is where complementary reviews are able to put a better, finer tooth comb through the work and make sure your accuracy is where it needs to be. Additionally, different sets of eyes allow you to consider the customer from different angles. Beyond catching errors, this is how you can introduce new perspectives and how you can avoid unintended biases in your work. We tend to think the way we view a piece of work is the way everyone would view it, but this is just not the case. Having different people with different experiences and different backgrounds read your work enable you to avoid unconscious, unintended biases and mistakes in the way you phrase your work. You may find a phrase unoffensive, and someone else may. This is the benefit of having a team approach to your editing. Always write to make the most number of people comfortable and to address most specifically the language that matters most. Sometimes regional dialects, colloquialisms, cultural vernaculars may not be all things within our wheelhouse that we have personal experience with. This is why relying on a team of people who do can help enhance the quality of your content. So to recap, editing is a team sport. Rely on a diverse team to get a more complete and thorough review, not just for the softer cultural content, but for the hard technical aspects of your SEO as well. Edit in the right order. Edit voice and tone, then structure, then spelling and grammar. Lastly, remember to go back to your brief. Make sure that you haven't missed on synonyms or phrasings of your key phrases so that your editing doesn't disrupt the technical aspects of your ranking. Do all of these things regularly. Editing is not something you check off the list once, but something you will need to revisit every time you modify or improve your content, especially if you're actively testing variations. For your homework, I have 2 assignments I'd like you to work on. The first is to take a look at the content you have today, one you've already edited, and I want you to re-edit it. Don't modify before you go through this final draft with a fine-tooth comb. Just take something that you would otherwise have published ready and apply some of these formulas. The idea here is to catch your low-hanging fruit for improvement. Go through in order, voice and tone, check against your guide document. Look at the structure for simplicity and minimalism. Make sure that you've applied it well. And lastly, after those changes have been made, review again for grammar and spelling. Consider, while you're going through this review, loading the content into a supportive application, like Grammarly or Hemingway. These apps will allow you to double-check phrasing, repeat spelling, synonym suggestions, beyond what you alone may be able to check. Lastly, take that same piece of content and go to a trusted source, a friend, a colleague whom you can have review with you. Preferably, have multiple people review it. Again, the goal here being to have different perspectives, different backgrounds, put their eye and their experience to your content to evaluate it. When you are done, compare the finished product to where you started. Look at the amount of changes that did or did not take place and use this as a benchmark to where your existing editing process is and whether you should update that process. The second assignment I would like you to practice is to create a new piece of content, but this time integrate the editing process we've outlined in the first assignment into the creation process itself for a fresh piece of content. Take this new piece of content, and as you are writing it, go through and apply the structures and the tools we've discussed. Highlight or bold your SEO key phrases so you can see the difference between them and the surrounding content. Go through and use supportive applications as you write to be able to make sure the wrapper to these terms is a wonderful journey that steers people through a sensible narrative. As you continue revising, as you go to your subject matter experts, have multiple people chime in and review. The more sets of eyes that review your work as you create it will minimize the amount of review you will need to do in post of the original creation. Lastly, as you approach the finish line, multiple spell checks will be helpful, but again, go back to your SEO brief so that you do not accidentally undermine the technical ranking. Of course, the last step with whether it's new content or old content is to make sure your keyword density is intact. UX and UI changes have a tendency to alter density as you progress. This is why integrating it into the initial creation phase can be so helpful. This is so important because you'll be able to check as you create that your keyword density does not rise or lower outside of the acceptable target range. You've reached the end of this lesson. By now, you should be able to understand what the process of editing can do for your content, the key processes you should build into your own editing review, and as well as the benefits and pitfalls of getting editing right or wrong. Doing all of the steps you've learned here will enhance your user experience and increase audience retention as they consume your content. Build these processes into your content creation so that you can avoid additional stages of review after completion. In the next lesson, we'll be discussing designing of your content and UX in order to increase retention further and enhance the positive experience that your customers have while consuming your content. Thank you for learning with me. I'm Mike Phillips, and remember, don't let editing get you down. Build a system and a process and it will become a natural part of your content creation.